Coming up in the National Report, the national security boss talks about electronic monitoring and possible parole.
The search continues for murder convict Armin Leon.
And will Bahamas be ready for a major conference in the coming weeks? Find out the Bahamas tonight. The National Report starts now.
Now in HD. ZNS Network presents The Bahamas Tonight. This portion of the news brought to you by BTC Everyday.
Authorities taking a closer look at electronic monitoring as it pushes ahead with a parole and probation program. Good evening, everyone. I'm Keishla Adderley.
And I'm Charisma Robinson. Major changes on the way to track those on bail. The electronic monitoring system was implemented several years ago, and since then there have been a number of challenges. But as authorities clog those loopholes, they're ensuring that the necessary measures are in place as they look at a parole and probation program. Janelle Ferguson tells us that the National Security Minister's comments came at a major conference today.
National Security Minister Dr. Bernard Nottage admitted that while there have been some improvements with the electronic monitoring system, many of the challenges still exist.
People cut the bracelets off themselves or use paper foil and all that, and the follow-up when this happens must be immediate. But the selective enforcement team that the Commissioner has instituted in the Royal Bahamas Police Force have been a very good job following these people up very quickly.
His comments came as the government looks to implement a parole and probation program funded in part by the Inter-American Development Bank. A two-day forum is being held at the Hilton Hotel with stakeholders on the way forward. Knowledge acknowledged that the probation program will be an extension of the monitoring program, but additional resources are needed.
In terms of manpower, in terms of the training they have, in terms of access to skills training where it's required, and counseling and so forth. So there will be an increase in manpower required for the parole system to be successfully implemented. But what we have to spend on that we'll save by not having these people incarcerated.
It costs about $14,000 annually to house each incarcerated prisoner. There are more than 1,500 prisoners housed at the Department of Corrections. Speaking to attendees, Nottage said the government has begun to put in reforms in place by reducing the time for one's criminal record to be expunged. But he says more reforms are needed.
What I have to do is get up from my desk and look down to see if they're wearing an electronic ankle bracelet. Because if I send them somewhere for a job and they're wearing one of them, they ain't get no job. People scared of them. And then they come and say, well, Doc, if I can't get a job, how am I going to feed my family?
Meanwhile, ICS Security continues to monitor those on bail on a month-to-month contract. Nottage says the bidding process is underway for the government to secure a new contract to monitor those on bail.
We have had submissions from local vendors. They have been examined, and when the result is completed, you'll know. Because I'll tell you.
It's expected that the parole and probation program will not only save taxpayer dollars but reduce crime on our streets. Nottage hopes to have the plan rolled out by the end of the year. Janelle Ferguson, ZNS Network News.
The police force is still in an all-out search for escaped convict Armin Leon. Leon escaped police custody on Tuesday after appearing in court for sentencing on a murder conviction. Now, sentencing has been adjourned to February 16th. Senior Assistant Police Commissioner Leon Bethel, while leading an operation recently, told ZNS News the entire weight of the force is coming down on the escaped convict and admonished him to surrender. The force has also been following upon the tips of members of the public as they seek to get Leon back behind bars.
3 men and a woman are in police custody in connection with a major armed robbery ring. Police believe the four to be responsible for a string of armed robberies over the past few weeks. Authorities say during the arrest last night, officers recovered a pistol, ammunition, a car allegedly used during robberies, and several stolen cell phones. Investigations continue.
Well, the Bahamian Riviera may be in limbo, but it's expected to be buzzing with activity in a matter of weeks for a major conference. Finance ministers from IDB member states are expected to gather for the high-level talks to chart the way forward for their respective countries.
But with the resort's doors still closed, the question is whether the conference center will be ready for such a big event. Well, our Cleopatra Murphy tells us that the Minister of State for Finance addressed the issue today.
There is still no clear date for when the multi-billion-dollar Bahamas resort will open, but the resort's conference center will be the venue of the Inter-American Development Bank and the Inter-American Investment Corporation's annual general meeting in just over 2 months. Minister of State for Finance, the Honorable Michael Halkitis, announced that more than 5,000 delegates will gather at the conference center from April 7th through 10th. Halkitis says any concerns he had about the convention center not being ready were allayed after a tour on Monday.
The bulk, from what I can see, is for us to put in the temporary offices, which involves erecting cubicles, etc. And very, very confident that we will be ready. But my feeling was just one of being impressed with the facility.
Halkitis says government has invested $6 million in preparation for the event. The meeting will focus on key concerns, including youth development.
At this meeting, climate change and renewable energy will be regarded as priority areas for future IDB interventions in contributing toward the economic development in the Bahamas and the Caribbean region.
Halkitis says the IDB has contributed more than $800 million to the country through development partnerships. Hosting the conference will provide a significant boost for tourism, along with other economic benefits.
It would also showcase the Bahamas as a premier destination for hosting international business meetings, conferences, and conventions.
Project coordinator Janine McCartney says young people have been engaged throughout the planning process. Just as Bahamian artwork is displayed throughout Bahamas, McCartney says a gallery will be set up at the hotel for Bahamians to sell their work.
We have, I would say, a well-oiled machinery ready to host this meeting that will provide the Bahamas with a tremendous opportunity to showcase ourselves and our talent.
Cleopatra Murphy, ZNS Network News.